Tactical Tuesday after a 3-day weekend, right? To Memorial. I love it. We're all back here, ready, refreshed. Summer has started. Yeah. We're joined by Scott Ford this morning. Drew, what are you excited about this morning? What are you excited? I know we've had Scott on the books for a while.
Yeah, Scott's a good buddy of mine. We go way back. He was my angel on my shoulder during my TL days to keep me out of trouble. I love watching how he does business and how he takes care of his clients and the way that he shares and commits to his value proposition. So I'm super excited for him to kind of teach us how he communicates today. There's a lot of good nuggets in here. I would have your pen on speed dial and have your notebook wide open for this one for sure.
I love it.
Thank you, Drew.
Said they go way back like Cadillac seats.
That's right.
Yes. Okay, Scott, welcome. Glad to have you here. You know, what is strategic communication? Then we'll get into a little bit about who Scott Ford is.
So let me give just a little background of how I got to this point. So, and Drew's heard this story from last December. Last December was watching a podcast that Jimmy Burgess was doing with a agent from Calgary, and the subject was listing presentation and video marketing. And watching that, they talked about strategic communications, which I had heard the term before, but had not really done any research or understanding of what that actually means in the corporate context. And as I and Drew knows that I will go down information rabbit holes, quite easily. Fortunately, in this case, the whole led back to the surface with some what I think is some pretty good information that any of us can apply to our real estate business. And uh, in March, I got asked to do a listing presentation class in my brokerage. And we had in the prior 6 weeks had at least two agents give the same kind of talk. And they focused on the nuts and bolts of the actual meeting and documents that you would bring to the meeting and how to answer questions. And I wanted to do something different. And at that point, I had already done a lot of research on the concept of strategic communications and thinking about how it could be applied to real estate business. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do a presentation on how do you use the principles of strategic communication to help you win a listing before you ever have a meeting. And the focus was more upon not SOI, not people that you already have some connectivity to, but the people that find out about you and before they ever talk to you, they want to learn more and they typically will look online and what is the information. And so that's the genesis of this uh, presentation. Strategic communication is basically influencing people's decision process before they ever decide that they need your product or service. And companies spend a lot of money every year to influence that decision process. And there's some nuggets, as Drew said, that we certainly can incorporate into how we market ourselves, how we tell our selling story to the public. So that's the genesis of this whole presentation.
I love it, Scott. Tell me a little bit about you and your business. Did you get your license 2 years ago, 20 years ago? What does that look like? Where are you?
I was a corporate attorney for 23 years, and in 2014, uh, I still loved what I was doing. At that point I had gone in-house, and but I was looking for the next challenge. And a friend of mine who was my first business partner, he was the one that brought up real estate. He says, "Hey, we both know a little bit about houses. We like talking with people, working with people." And he brought up real estate. And I thought about it for probably better part of a year. thinking about if I was going to be a real estate agent, what would I do? Because anybody can be a real estate agent. So I decided to get my license, joined Keller Williams brokerage in Alexandria, and was dual career for 2015 to through 2017. And I was as I was phasing out what I call the legacy work uh, as in-house counsel, was ramping up real estate business. And January of 2018, my business partner, he got relocated to Alabama for the last year of his federal government service in 2017. So in January 2018, I said, this is my future and I need to dedicate full time to that. So I've been in the real estate profession for about 10 years and full time since the start of 2018.
Okay.
Mostly
Well,
focus on representing sellers. I in West End of Alexandria, Virginia. Uh, I have focused primarily on geographic farming, on three different townhouse communities that one of which I live in, and two that are within a mile of where I live. And the other thing I focus on, and some of which you'll see in the presentation, is visual presentation of information, of houses, of information. That's something I love to do and have an aptitude for it. I have no idea where it comes from. The micro market analysis, I understand that from the business background. The interior design stuff, some latent gene that I had that got unleashed. But
okay.
nothing in my background. Like the photo that we're looking at on the screen, that's one of the houses that I've fully furnished. And so this gets me, allows me to play interior designer while still representing people as a real estate professional.
I love it. I love it. Scott,
So,
go
Scott,
ahead.
let's dig in. Let's go straight into the presentation, but I have
Okay.
a couple questions after you get started, but
Okay.
want to let you get going first.
Okay. So let's start out. What is strategic communication? Let me just slide this a little bit out of the way. Again, here's if you're looking, for research, the purposeful use of communication to achieve specific organizational goals by developing and delivering messages that target specific audiences to influence their perceptions and behavior. Perception is a huge part of what I'm going to talk about. And I mentioned about businesses spending a lot of money. The data that I was looking at, the average marketing budget was 9% of revenue, not profit, of revenue, with, depending upon the industry, 5 to 14%. So businesses are spending a tremendous amount of money to influence people's decision process regarding using that company's product or service. Uh, So now I got three whys that, what's why number one using strategic communication? It's like the audience wants to know what your purpose and value is without guessing. Here's where, this among anything else is probably the most important. Again, it gets to influencing and shaping the public's decision process before that individual ever decides they need the company's product or service. And so applying that to the real estate profession is getting people to the position where you're already hired before they ever meet with you. And third why is it's the ability to have 100% control over the content and delivery of your message. There's very few things in our profession, very few things in life that we can have 100% control over. Through strategic communication, you get to decide how the public sees what you do, who you are as a real estate professional. So there's basically four pillars of strategic communication. First is analyzing your audience. Who are you targeting? Who are you trying to communicate with? Choosing the right means of communication, as I'll talk about. There's three means. It's visual, narrative, written, and verbal. uh, Intentional message design, thinking about what is the information you're presenting, what is the story that you're presenting, what's the purpose of that, and then what's called the three C's: clarity, conciseness, and consistency. And we'll get into that a little bit, each one of those. So first, analyze your audience. So if we're thinking about, and this for the most part is not people who are already in your SOI. These are trying to communicate with people that uh, don't know about you. Maybe it's a referral by a former client or somebody who happens to know you or know of you, but that person who's got the referral doesn't know who you are. So you're trying to understand what that person, i.e., the public, what their priorities and perceptions are. And again, this is where perception, again, is reality, and we want to shape people's reality. So if we
So,
think
Scott,
about,
can I stop you for a
you
second?
can stop me anytime, Drew.
Thank you, brother. Thank
Yeah.
you. So you're on pace to do almost 20 million right now, as of right now, and it's in three, really two neighborhoods in the west end of Alexandria,
Mhm.
right? And so you're communicating with these people on a strategic level to the point where sometimes you'll be there working on one of your other listings, and someone you don't know will come up to you to have a real estate conversation.
That's absolutely right. It's through communication that I've done to the community as a whole, but it's not somebody that's I know personally. It's not somebody on my they may be on a mailing list, but it's not somebody that I even have their phone or email with. But they know who I am, and they'll see me in the community and stop and say, "Hey, what's going on?" or "Can you help us?" So, yeah, again, that's not strictly no connectivity. There is some connectivity in there, but there's not a already existing personal relationship with that type of future client.
But it's a part of your strategic communication
It
is to
absolutely
get
is.
that result.
Yeah, it
Okay.
100% is trying to, again, it's what is your selling story and how are you communicating your selling story with people, public. So again, if we think about the public's perception of the real estate profession, it's generally speaking, it's not good. We do a little work, we get paid a lot. Choice of agent doesn't matter. Our profession has allowed what we do to get dumbed down in the eyes of the public. And that's on us as a profession. But that is the public's overall perception of what we do. Obviously, nobody on this call is like that, but that's a perception we have to deal with. So, again, if you think about people's perception, the public's perception, you take that perception and you leverage it to your advantage. You confound their expectation as to what a true real estate professional does, and just as importantly, does not do. So, part of your selling story to the public through strategic communication is creating their new reality on what real estate exceptionalism is. And that exceptionalism is manifested in everything that you communicate outwardly to the public, whatever the medium is. So the second element is the right means of communication. As I said earlier, there's three. There's visual, there's narrative, written, and then there's verbal. And probably everybody's heard uh, the statement that human beings have the attention span of a goldfish. As I started doing research on this, that's actually um, apocryphal in the sense that it came from apparently a discredited uh, research. But what research does show is the human attention span is as short as 8 seconds, perhaps as long as 2.5 minutes. More attention is paid to visual and written information. People respond to it better, they retain it better. There's less attention, less ability to grasp and respond to verbal. So, what's the best means of where is my what's the best means to communicate visual and narrative information? So, I've already shown what that is, which is online through and we'll talk about different mediums, but it gets back to it. You have 100% control over content and how the public interacts with your selling story. And it leverages the most effective means of communication, visual and narrative versus verbal. Here's the other analogy that I make. So your online presence, it serves the same purpose with a prospective seller. And again, this is my focus on sellers, but it serves the same purpose with a prospective client as house photos and a listing narrative does with buyers. It, just as a listing photos and narrative creates an opportunity to capture the or create emotional connectivity between a prospective buyer and a house that could be their new home. How you strategically communicate, how you present your selling story, it's an opportunity to create that positive connection and expectation in advance of a face-to-face meeting with a prospective client. If we think about, again, the difference between verbal and visual and narrative, a face-to-face interaction is going to give up some control over message delivery. The content and flow of your presentation can be influenced by human, environmental, and time factors. The third element, intentional message design. Again, this gets back to what I said earlier. You're trying to subvert a seller. And again, this is focused on getting a listing, but it would apply just as much when you're talking with a respective buyer client. You're subverting that individual's expectation. The message delivery, you want the person to conclude they have undervalued what an agent does and undervalued the difference that their choice of agent will make in this case, the sale process.
This is like under promise, over deliver.
Yeah. It, as versus what I think a lot of our industry does, which is either under promise and under deliver or over promise in I'll be with you every step of the way. No one will work harder. Everybody says that. It is meaningless. So again, it's deciding what is your individual selling story? What are your X factors? Mine is, a concierge level of service with a focus on micro market analysis and a passion for visual presentation. That's what I do for selling clients in a nutshell, because that's who I am. That leverages two things that I realize I'm pretty good at is the market analysis at as Drew, at a granular level, and then the visual presentation, furnishing people's houses. I love doing that. And as it turns out, I have a pretty good talent for that. But I think we all have our individual X factors. What makes us different and better than another real estate agent that just meets the perception that the public has of what we do or don't do?
Scott, what's a selling story? You use that phrase. Like, what does that
The,
mean to you?
the selling story is if I'm trying to communicate in all medium about who I am as a real estate professional, why would you be better off choosing to partner with me to help you sell your home to get on to the next phase of your life or find your new home? I'll get into some tangible and intangible things, but that's I think it comes from who you are, because people can smell out passion versus, you know, insincerity, or this is something that sounds good versus it's who you are as a core person, as a core service provider. Let me get this out of the way.
And you've
So,
used the word confound and you've used the
mhm,
word subvert,
yep.
right? Which both are about surprising and kind of going against those. Is that something that I'm explicitly saying? I'm saying, you know, a lot of other, this agents are like this and I'm like this because I've done that. I've seen that presentation before. I've seen that. I don't know if
I
I've done it
think
before or is
so.
it, yeah.
I mean, if you get asked a question and you want to draw a distinction, I think, when you're in the room, if it comes down to that,
Okay,
that
gotcha. The
make that
average
choice.
agent
But
does
in
X.
general, I
Okay.
think through strategic communication, you understand that the public at large has a certain perception of what real estate agents do and don't do. You don't have to talk about those things, but what you're presenting is different than that. So somebody says, "Oh, wow, I never thought a real estate agent would do that." And they can also understand how doing that can benefit them.
Okay.
And that's where I get to sell your exceptionalism versus the public perception. Figuring
Okay.
out what you do as a real estate professional, how it's exceptional. And exceptional doesn't mean I'm the best. It means you're different than the norm. And the key is how you just present that. It's done in a way that the person can the hearing the public can understand. Oh, that's different, and I understand how that can benefit me. And here's where I mentioned, I think earlier, intangible benefits. So we focus a lot on the tangible, money and time. I think a lot of times we forget to also talk about the intangible benefits that a true real estate professional will deliver to their client, which is can be more certainty, more confidence in the process and result, less stress. That's a subjective thing for individuals, but I guarantee it's a non-zero number for everybody. And I think, again, most agents they don't think to talk about the intangible benefits. And I think that's another way that you can distinguish yourself in someone's perception of, Scott Ford or Justin Myers or Drew Swirsky versus my perception of real estate agents. And I think the next slides get into another analogy that I really like, and it's founded on my corporate legal background. But particularly, I think it applies across the country, but particularly in areas like Northern Virginia, selling your house is the equivalent of selling a small business. If you're selling a small business, you'd want the best contracts attorney and the best financial advisor that you could get. Why should people settle for less from an agent when selling your house? And that's part of people not, and through our inability or allowing the perception of what we do to get dumbed down, we are indispensable to a one of the most important fiscal and life affecting decisions that people will make. I think we need to lean into that. I think people hearing that will be receptive to it because it's an easy analogy to understand. It's something that I like to call, or not me calling it. It's a truism. It's hard to argue with that logic. And the fourth element is what's called the three C's: clarity, conciseness, and consistency. Clarity stated in a way that a seller will readily understand how they will benefit from you as their agent. So that's the messaging. It's like, how do I distill that down into visual narrative in a way that you're telling the story that leads to that in conclusion. And, again, just as in furnishing a house, less is more. Storytelling, less is more. Let the overall visual and narrative content show or demonstrate your exceptionalism. And then consistency. It's a unified, coherent message across all communication channels and platforms. You're reinforcing your selling story and building trust. And I'm going to take a moment to talk about how, the mediums to use. And it gets to consistency. One of the mediums that I think a lot of agents overlook is the website. Most agents, if you look at them, the website they have, if they have one, will be the website template offered by whatever brokerage they're affiliated with, which is, let's just say it's limited functionality. And to the extent an agent will have that, they'll have a home page with maybe a little bit of information, or it'll have a search bar to say find your new home. Maybe they've got a blog page template, not that they've actually done anything with it. I've talked to a lot of agents in my particular office. Out of 350, I probably talked to 100 about this, of all different um, stages of their career. And most of them, very high percentage, will be, if they have one, they'll be using, in this case, the kw.com website. And they may not even put their past transactions on there. And it looks like every other real estate website that's out there. So if someone, again, this is focused on non-SOI, people that aren't already have connectivity with you, well, the first thing they're probably going to do is Google your name. Chances are your website's going to come up. That's your first interaction with that prospective client, just like listing photos are the first interaction that a prospective buyer has with that property. The other thing about consistency is, and again, instead of a website, you could use YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. The one thing about most of us, we're not good on consistency on anything, but with social media, you have to be consistent to have the algorithm work for you. And if you're not, you get penalized by the algorithm. And so, what a website allows you to do is, again, 100% control over content, but you're not penalized if you haven't updated it in the last 3 months, because most of the stuff on there would not be time sensitive unless you make it time sensitive. A blog, yes, you probably see when's the last time you've uh, put a blog post on, but it has an evergreen element that social media may not, and oftentimes does not. Justin.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Latrice had a question about the conciseness. She has to go back to
Mhm.
the conciseness section there, right? Latrice, what did you want to, what was your specific question?
No, sorry.
Sorry, the mute button. I just wanted to read it and take a picture.
Oh,
Okay, great. So you're saying, hey, we got to be consistent. One of the ways to hedge that consistency is to be intentional about the platforms that we're showing up on. Um, hey, if you lean into the website. So I put Scott's website in the comments if anyone wants to see it and see how.
yeah. And the thing about a website, so I went onto Wix and created my website about a little over a year ago. And I looked at a lot of websites done by successful teams in my area and said, okay, well, that's a section or type of information that I'm seeing across really nice websites. And I would not copy what they had, but copy just style to some degree. There are also several, or many, I should say, not several, there are many companies that create real estate websites that are really good to work with. They have excellent templates that are, look high end, a lot of functionality that can, again, break you out of the perception of, okay, this is what, I go to look at some agent's website and it's the standard, brokerage template that looks the same. So that's an opportunity to spend some time to create your own selling story in a visual and narrative way that is not subject to the thing that bedevils all of us is consistency in whatever action, whether it's you know ongoing contact with folks in our SOI or public or posting on social media.
Hey, so Scott,
Yeah.
I've been your coach and friend for 3 years now. You know how you and I think like totally opposite, like opposite ends of the spectrum. Can you give us an example of how all of this worked for you, like a real world example? Someone came to you and said, I saw your website, or I saw what you did at 555 Happy Street, and how that turned into either a lot of business, I mean, one deal or multiple deals.
I've had two people in fall of 24 and one of my listings this year who I did not know. Someone who knows me mentioned my name. They Googled my name, found my Bella Casa Partners website, and then the next thing that came up was the one of the living in community
Yeah,
websites that I created.
we'll get to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to get to
And
that
so
next.
they looked at that and contacted me. And so one of the things that I do and said, hey, I want to meet with you to help, talk on the house. So my listing presentation has that I provide before is here's a link to the website. Here's a link to two or three property websites that I've done because that shows in a real world example everything that I do as a real estate professional. And they said to me, we've already looked at your website. We love what was on it. And basically, I was hired before I ever met them.
And that's what you're talking about in this
That's
presentation.
exactly
Is
what,
in
yeah.
their head, you're all in their head, they're already working with you.
And I'll give you and Drew, you know this from prior Tactical Tuesdays, when we've had people on who have talked about long form video, short form video, branding. I've been texting Drew during the presentation saying, this is strategic communication at a high level. And one example, Matt London, Coastal Delaware. He's been in the business like 5 years or so, is my recollection. He looked at his area and said, "Hey, there are people here that are entrenched agents who sell properties." He said, "What I'm going to do, because I live in Delaware where there are beaches and low taxes, there will be people deciding potentially to move to Delaware for those two reasons. I'm going to create a YouTube channel that puts out in video uh, talking about Delaware, coastal Delaware. And he talked about there are people that watch his videos that he's never met that contact him and say, we feel like we already know you. You're our agent because we've decided to buy a home in coastal Delaware. That is 100% strategic communication because his intent is to influence people's decision about moving to Delaware before they even decide to do that. And when they decide to do that, they've already got their agent and he doesn't know it specifically.
Right.
He's already
So,
hired. He's been hired 6 months, a year in advance. And then he gets the call and say, hey, we're moving. Help us do this.
and so, we always break down cost of sale and things like that when we run a business. Minus the sweat equity of putting the websites together, what do this usually cost you on average so for your living in, which I'll get to, and your Bella Casa site, you pay about what?
Can we show the site? Because what I learned from you is that verbal attention span is low and that visual and narrative is high. And Scott has this. So yeah, Scott, if you don't mind sharing, I don't know if that's
Oh,
going to throw your presentation off. Can you share the website? You get
my
the
website or the
your website, whatever website we're going to be talking about. But
okay.
let's
I
got
got
an
it.
example, or you want to just pull up, Bella Casa Partners. Let's look because it's easier to show than to tell, and you can see exactly what it looks like. Perfect. So there's the recent properties, and then you're at your home. Okay. Let me
So,
talk.
everything about me, recent properties, what clients say, House of BCP, the partnership that I have with the Alexander Animal Shelter. That's my blog. Um, this talks about, again, what I do, which is really, I'm an interior designer that has a unofficial interior designer that has um, a real
Real
estate
estate license.
license. But I'm leaning into things that are part of my selling story that is genuine to me, that I happen to be good at, and that I own enough to right now I have one house under contract, one ready to come, and one active that I've fully furnished with stuff that I own. Um, and it's easy for somebody to conclude, again, this is for me, how an agent that will, as part of the representation, fully furnish a house at this level, it's easy for them to figure out, yeah, that would be helpful in selling the house. It's just, figuring out what each of our individual selling stories happens to be. Um, so again, I'm big on visual and um, narrative. Let that tell your story without before you ever get a chance to talk to them. And at that point, an analogy I use is you're pushing against an open door. You're
So I'm gonna be concise because Scott and because Scott, here's what I saw because I went on your website and I looked at it. If you go to your homepage, everything is on that initial homepage and you see a lot of visuals, right?
Mhm.
Scott, like visual identity, the brand there on the homepage. You can see it consistently again and again, right? If we can go back to it, I want to show
Oh,
this.
sorry. Sorry.
That's okay. Because I wanted to see it. I have found, I know that that's what from talking, doing these classes over and
Right.
over again, it is always the 101. We always want to talk about the 201, and it's the
Mhm.
101 where we leave everybody.
That's
And
true.
it is 1%. It is the top slice where it's the 201. I'm in those rooms. That's not the majority of agents. It's the 101. It is, I don't even have a client newsletter. I don't need to get into the micro of how I'm tracking the links in the client newsletter. So bam, there's a value proposition. Do I have a value proposition? It is articulated, right?
Mhm.
Scott is showing the value proposition there. And then there's the Bella Casa Partners difference. And if you click on the flyer, it totally lays out what he does. And if you go to the House of BCP, which I was like, what is that? That's such a, and then it's like, oh, great. He lays out in that House of BCP, hey, we stage, we have the House of BCP as he presents himself. We have like an interior design division. We have all of this stuff, and we can stage your house with the House of BCP, right? It's again, it's creating a sense of luxury, it's creating a sense of exceptionalism, it's branding this, it's not just staging, it's the House of BCP, right? Those intangibles. So it's all laid out there and you can see it, right? Like that's what I think is really interesting. Is if you go to that main page, I was just like, ah, I love it. I talk about the lost dog poster, Scott, right? In our industry, so often it is aesthetics, but we don't convey the lost dog message. I don't know what the name of the dog is. I don't know where I'm supposed to call. I don't know what the reward is. It's like a super cute house and like an illegible address or something. There's no call to action. Here, the call to action, if you scroll just a little bit here, which I love, like on your first properties, is there's a house, there's the story. You can click to see the whole listing. There's a house, there's the listing description, right? Real boom, but the visual of it is consistent of which probably helps because you're selling consistent properties.
Yeah.
It really like leans into where it's all kind of aesthetically appealing. You're not selling a potpourri. Well, sometimes we are. I'm selling a potpourri of like maybe you're seeing a cabin, maybe you're seeing land, but in this case, you're niched. It looks really, really great. Does that help anybody on the call? And everybody's this is one of our quieter ones that help just to see it. Like this is what it looks like in action, you know?
Yeah, and I think that the biggest takeaway that I would just share is again, it's and the whole subverting expectations is not something that I came up with. That's out of the film industry. Uh, and it's you're understanding what people's perceptions are, and you're doing something to distinguish yourself. And that's the thing that no matter where you are in your real estate career, this is a great equalizer. You could have very few transactions and you can create a selling story and present it in a way that will, one, look professional, and it's going to be different than what most other agents will do. And that goes a long way in having somebody say, wow, this looks high end. I
Mhm.
understand how they are going to benefit me. And if
Well,
they,
I love it. You've gone full circle because it brings us back to Drew's question. Because Rob said, I love it. I'd hire you. You're already demonstrating your value before the appointment. You've converted me. What does that cost if I wanted to go create that website?
so for me, I didn't pay an entity to do it. For me, it was about 250 a year for my um, through Wix, and then
Yeah.
just time. Now, most people don't have the time and may not have, I don't know, the aptitude to create certain things. There are companies for, less than $3,000 will create a very high end um, looking website with a lot of functionality, IDX connection, blog, and you can control it 100% yourself in terms of uploading information. Very easy to use. And that's one of the problems with the brokerage websites. They're not intuitive. They can't be because they're trying, it's one size fits all. And that's not the primary purpose of with KW United, KW, it's Command. Like Command Designs is nowhere near as good as Canva because Canva is designed just for that. So,
Yeah.
um,
So we're running a little low on time. I wanted to talk
okay,
about the living in site real quick.
okay.
So Scott has farms that he farms, and when he decided on these farms, he went out and he created websites for, and they're called living in, and then whatever farm that he's working. Right? Can you tell us a little bit about that, the
Yeah.
CNN version, since we only have 2 minutes?
Here's again, same principle. If you're focusing on a particular community, become the expert in that community. So for this is a West End Alexandria community, and the houses I've sold in there, information about the community, you know, a blog that's just about information regarding development projects in West End Alexandria and restaurants and whatnot. Again, and when I have a listing, it's not just talking about the house. You're not just selling that. You're selling the community that goes with the house, and you're selling what I call the livability elements that go with somebody choosing that house to be their home. What's around there? In this case, being close to Old Town Alexandria, what's going on West End Alexandria. Again, it's a way to distinguish yourself, and people can understand how providing more information about the community and the local area can be helpful in selling the house. The other thing it does is conveys credibility. So if you think about negotiating is about establishing credibility and goodwill with the other side, somebody sees something like this or that level of detail in your listing narrative about the community and surrounding areas, and not just the generic things like, oh, you're close to the Pentagon, Washington, D.C., and Amazon HQ2 for our area. It conveys credibility that, oh, this agent knows this community and area. Therefore, if you get into a discussion about valuation on the property, the buyer agent may say, hey, to their client, you may not want to pay this, but this agent understands what the proper market value is for a house in this community in this area.
I love
I think this is great. I love
So
this.
let me just do a couple things about, and this gets to the stats about, 81% of sellers said they only contacted one agent. And it's reputation and trustworthy and honesty are the two biggest factors. But here's the thing, you're not shaping the decision to hire you as an agent. You're shaping the decision to have a meeting. If 81% of people only see one agent, getting the meeting is the objective. And the reality is, if you're using strategic communication to demonstrate your reputation, trustworthiness, and honesty, i.e., your professionalism, that 81% number likely moves to the upper 90%. So, just final thoughts. Selling story. What is your selling story? Tell that selling story so that people draw the conclusion they must be in business with you. Strategic communication is a supplement to, it's not a replacement for the personal meeting with a seller. Shaping the outcome is strategic. Presenting and reacting face to face is tactical. You want to shape the outcome before you ever have the meeting. It also lessens the pressure to get everything right in a face to face meeting because you've told your selling story before the meeting and you're pushing against an open door. In other words, unless you totally mess things up, chances are you're already hired. And the box. So this is one of the most, I mean, when I told Drew, he had the same reaction as I did. So this was the podcast last December. And this Calgary agent, does very well known agent in Calgary. Let's talk about listing presentation. One of the things that he said is he goes in and talks about there is a minimum standard of professional service and excellence as a real estate agent. He takes everybody else and puts them in a box and says, this is the minimum acceptable level of service. They're down here. What I do is over and above that. And without naming anybody or disparaging anybody, you've essentially, from a baseball analogy, put everybody else in double A and you're in the major leagues, which I thought was an absolutely conceptually brilliant way to help distinguish yourself, what you do from what other agents may or may not do. It was the first time I'd heard that and was like, oh my God, that is just absolutely a brilliant way to present that what I do is different.
That's awesome. Scott, thank you so much. Does anyone on here have any questions before we go?
I hope that was helpful.
All right,
Anybody
well,
have any ahas? Anybody have any takeaways? If you I've got some. I've got some. Hey, oh, I see some new names in here.
yeah,
Elkin. So my big one here would just be, one thing, Scott, is um man, what do I do if I don't feel exceptional? If it's not clear to me, I love that you said, hey, you should have a world-class contracts attorney. Well, I'm not an attorney by trade, so I don't know that I'm a contract, like, what does that look like, in
Mhm.
terms of exceptionalism? Like, are there ways to, I always talk about Schlitz beer and Ivory soap, that there are ways to package the things that we do and make them unique. So I don't know, is that just kind of telling the narrative? Is that
Oh,
like,
I think, again, it's confounding the expectations. The perception of real estate industry, and we're all members of the industry, is pretty low. So if you can be exceptional, you don't have to have bought or sold one house. And you can think about what does it mean to be a high quality real estate professional in terms of level of attention to detail, level of passion and commitment that you bring to supporting your clients' needs. And that just there, being able to talk about that in a way, and I don't mean verbally, although we would talk about that, but when you're coming up with the selling story about why you are an agent and what you do, that can make you exceptional because it makes you different from the norm or what people expect. And I also lean into it's not just what change people's perspective on what real estate professionals do, but what they don't do. And one of the things when I got into this business and thinking about do I want to change careers, I said it's too easy to become a real estate professional. Take a course, take a test, I pass, I affiliate, and Margot and Drew have heard me say this. There's a reason I wouldn't let most real estate agents run a lemonade stand. Uh, that I wanted to think about, it's too easy to become a real estate professional. What are the things that I would do? And I want to do something or not do something simply because that's what agents have done or not done over, you know, years and years and years. And so that's part of thinking about why would, and Drew, this is something you say, why would I hire myself? And putting that hat on and saying, well, what can I say or do? And talking about the service that I provide and understanding the importance of this process to you and come up with that story and then present that in, passionately and do it consistently. And again, that's where you can tell a selling story with 100% control on presentation in a website on, you know, the BCP difference,
Well,
where I say, hope and luck is no strategy for a well thought out, well executed plan to achieve the result.
are you because I think people sleep on SEO or pay per click or something now in the age of social media. Are you, and the things you showed us were website things and not social media, are you driving traffic off of a website versus
I
social media?
I am. What's really interesting to see is on the blog, where I'm just basically the blog is on my website is market analysis. I am seeing an interesting rise in people coming to the website that they've gotten through, organic searches. So the metrics are now, I can't point to any of that has directly led to business, but I am seeing, okay, the SEO on both the blog, but also just doing SEO for anything that's on the website, and that's where something like Wix will tell you for uh, images that you post, there's a way to help use that to help generate, be SEO friendly. So yeah, over the last 6 months, I've actually seen it's like, wow, um, that's really interesting, and it's kind of exciting because these are not people that I have any connectivity to, and
Mhm.
something similar to what at a lower rate than what Matt London is doing with Coastal Delaware and the YouTube videos. There's probably people that are tracking me that when they want to sell, they will contact me and say, "Hey, we've been following you, and yeah, we want to use you to sell." And that's hasn't happened yet, with the two exceptions that I've talked about. But that's pretty exciting to see this focus on the website and really thinking about strategic communications starting to show that kernels of business that I otherwise wouldn't get.
Yeah,
Man, this
fascinating.
is ton of information as usual, Scott. I
Appreciate you,
love it.
Scott.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.